I think we didn't reach that slide, right? Barely, yes. Okay, welcome back. I was asked to continue my presentation because it was cut in half. It's a little like software development. We all know that. I was already at 90%, and now the second 90% are coming. So this is just catching the problem a project like PEP is facing, because in our view, OpenPGP is a technology and GNU-PG is an implementation of that technology where we are depending on, while PEP is not doing or should not do crypto at all. That's not our job, because there is already very brilliant crypto projects, so we see our job in making it accessible. You know that I mentioned yesterday that what we try is we listen carefully when people from projects around crypto systems are describing best practice, because that is what we actually want to implement, right? So PEP is trying to implement best practice. PEP is a little more because of the political view we have. PEP includes, well, of course it's a little subversion. It's trying to move people to do cryptography, but by just making them not know that they do. So I had to promise at the CCC Zurich that I will wear that T-shirt when we have access, which is VolkerBirk with an S, because I'm convinced that's why they made me promise that. I'm convinced that VolkerBirk with an Z is really serving his customers. We don't talk about that, but that's actually true. Yes, Tim Berners-Lee is absolutely right with his view on Facebook. This is what they're doing. But how does that work? I have the feeling that VolkerBirk with an Z, which should be written with an S, is actually delivering something people want to have, which is communication. And this is something we all underestimate as hackers, as geeks, because for us, techniques is something we swim in like fishes, right? But for other people, technology basically is something which is there, which they don't understand, which they don't care to understand, which they should, but they don't. And they have totally different topics in their life. And for those people, and that's the masses, for those people, Facebook and WhatsApp are really delivering things. Also eBay and Amazon are doing that. They are delivering what those people want to have. In case of Facebook, it's communication. In case of WhatsApp, it's communication. But they are taking a huge price for that. No one wants to pay. They're just taking it instead of making it public. It's not a deal. No one agrees really to internet contracts. We all know that. No one reads them. It's not a deal. A deal is something which you do consciously. You want to have that and you want to give that for that. And they take the privacy of all people without asking them. They just cheat them. It's criminal what they do. So the idea is to provide things which people actually want to have, like VolkerBirk, and to give them their privacy back, not talking about it too much. So this is a geeky thing here, and I'm very happy being invited because I feel at home. But the users PEP is addressing are not in this room. No one here. You may be as lazy as I am and maybe like me hack now on a MUT plugin for PEP, which I do, because that's the email client I actually love, and I'm using for more than 15 years, and I will not change, because it's working like a charm and it's quick. And so because I'm lazy, I'm investing lots of time and work in it, being as lazy as I want to be. Sorry?
Did you have a look at the GHM-GNU code from MUT?
Yes, sure. Why?
Did you throw up?
What do you mean? No, I will just write some Python script in it.
Yeah, but it's cool. Don't read it if you have the chance to.
Oh, well, I started to read it and I quit quickly and I agree. But why not scripting it, MUT, you can script it. That's a Unix principle, right? Script it. Okay, so that's, if you're lazy, you may use PEP once in a while. If not, just continue using the tools you're using. If you feel good with the tools you're using, and those tools are great, I'm convinced, then just continue. That's not the issue. The issue is I'm switching color, I think. But it's still one of the traffic lights colors. Okay. So that's basically the idea. But if you want to do that, you need to address a huge amount of people. And for PEP, all people are equal. It's only their number. So there's lots of people in China, plenty of people in India, which are major parts of the planet when it comes to numbers of people, which we all want to address. There's people, of course, in the very rich, privileged islands in the northwest of this planet. Well, here, we want to address them too. And that's basically the idea, and all the other people, of course, because that's not yet 7 billion or 8 billion people, what I mentioned. But if you have a look on what they are using, you will see that they're using multiple platforms to communicate in a technical view now. Very different ones. That's what they use. They're using very different languages. They're using very different technologies today, because PEP does not want to replace what is there, but want to make it accessible to other people. For us, compatibility is highly important always. So we want to be compatible with the people who are the front runners and are actually encrypting and not kick their asses, right? That would be wrong. Because those people, if they support you, then they can tell other people, which they commonly do for 20 years already, that they should do crypto, but now they can tell it's even cost-free or low cost, and it's low cost in all dimensions, including the amount of work and the amount of knowledge you have to invest, nearly nothing, just to crypt. And there's multiple message transports, which are in the wild. PEP is trying to crypt the messaging systems which are actually there, and then to inject a messaging system which is based on GNU-net. Why are we actually doing the latter? Because it's breaking the PEP principle to just support what is in the market. We are doing that because we didn't find a single messaging system with the properties we would love to have, so we are adding that one which is missing. But we will continue to support the others. It's not mandatory. So that's basically what we do, and that's a huge thing. You see, if we saw something about matrices, if I just may mention that this is just, think about the cross product of that. That's what we try to address. And so we identify groups of people using in that tensor here, using things in that tensor, and we try to make it in the sequence of numbers of people using that combination. Okay, that's the sequence we are trying to follow. There's one exception. We have a business concept to finance the project because it's a huge one. So we make an exception. We created an Outlook plugin first because we have very good access to enterprises, and they all use now Outlook. They all switched away from Lotus Notes and stuff. And yes, terrible things, I know. But again, as PEP, we don't care what they're using, we care that they start to crypt. That we see that as our mission. So if I go into the platforms, our first user is the application programmer. I think I mentioned that yesterday, and we're into the topic again. I showed you the different adapters, and the adapters are clearly addressing the default which the application programmer has. Which means if you open, let's say, for example, Android Studio, I can say, you know, I'm working with Android Studio, with Visual Studio, with Xcode, with KDevelop. You saw how I work if I can choose, right? Little different, but we are working with all those tools just to serve people who are actually just doing that, and I cannot choose, right? They are doing that. And the idea of the adapters is when they enter PEP and a dot, then usually there is a pop-up list. If they choose one of these options, they are safe. That is the design goal, not kidding, of the adapters. So we design the API, we work on the API in a way that we expect application programmers, we expect them being lazy and choosing only one of the options which are in the pop-up. We all know that, or maybe you didn't notice it yet because you're not into that, but for me as a software architect, which I commonly are in commercial projects, that's my job, that's where my money comes from. Usually you're leading development teams there, and my biggest enemy always is Stack Exchange. Because that's what my developers do. They Google. No, they're not using DuckDuckGo, they're not using Xquick. Take it literally, they Google. And then they find Stack Exchange. And then they copy out whatever that fucking idiot put in, right? Because that's the solution, it's standing there. And you find that copy in the source code. And they don't think about if that is a good idea or not, because it works. Okay? That's basically how most of the source code in application development is being created, face it or not. There's a second. Second enemy is the IDE. Your enemy as an architect is Visual Studio, Xcode, Android Studio, worst of Eclipse. Why are they enemies? Because that's the second thing application programmers do. They have some name, enter a dot, and a pop-up comes. And then their full mind gets limited to these options. And believe it or not, they try them out in sequence from time to time. If one of these options actually, quote, works, unquote, then that's the code you get. So how can I deal with that? Because that's my customer now, right? Right? It's my first user is the application programmer. And it's this application programmer. So we are designing the API in a way that if ever possible, the first option works. Whatever pops up has to be the thing which is right and which is the good choice and which is safe. We are doing security, hello? So we are optimizing our APIs on that, believe it or not. And we are actively testing that with IDEs they are using. And that's the reason why we are developing the fucking shit with the IDEs they have. So that's, and trying to reduce the API that it's so hard to choose the wrong option because it's even not there. We will, when we find application developers, it's still mainly ourselves, we found the first ones for Kmail. When we find them, we will watch closely Stack Exchange even enter that and try to enter safe solutions, right? So they can be copied out. So that's basically our very first user group, which is highly important, because we try, by making it such easy to get encryption in an application, we try to convince application programmers, why not offering an extra feature? Your app can do things, in this case, encryption, and it costs nearly nothing, right? And we are supporting all of them. We are supporting free software products. We even finance free software products if they agree to encrypt. However they do that, and if they want to use PEP, we support them fully and they pay nothing. We even pay people who hack it in. Not kidding. You just say yes and you get PEP into. The second thing we have is we have a full program for commercial application developers doing just the same thing with support contract, call guarantee that if something goes wrong, we are there and so forth. So application developer, obviously, we take them very serious as a target group. There may be some cynicism in my presentation here, but it's just out of experience. I can formulate that in a very positive way too. The application program is under pressure. He has to or she, mostly it's a he, sometimes it's a she. They have to implement features. And their bosses make pressure, so they try to find the quickest way to get the feature work, because that's the pressure they get, right? And that's why they behave like that. They are not all stupid. That's not what I'm saying, but I have enough cynicism, of course, to see how what that ends up with. That's how it is. And that gives the adapter concept. And we are really working on the adapter concept. It's not yet ready. We're just learning by doing. We create adapters for different platforms, play around with themselves, develop them ourselves on those platforms, and watch under these conditions, well, is that now good or not? And it's only good if it's very easy to build the app and get the feature in, right? Or it's bad. We have different concepts for adapters. On the mobile platform, we try to make them just a component for your IDE. So you just get a component in Android Studio or a component in Xcode. And that's why we are publishing, if you go to our repository, you will see that we have published configuration files for these IDEs. So you really can drag and drop a PEP adapter, including everything, into your IDE, and you have encryption, including GNU-PG, for example, for Android. That's what we're doing.
Why do you call them adapters and not libraries? I'm just confused about the terminology.
Well, we could. They are not all libraries. Some of them are actually executables. That's depending on case. So the adapter is not always implemented as a library. Actually, it's an adapter in the way that it fulfills the adapter pattern, right? We adapt from having a C library into having a complete solution you can drag and drop into your IDE and it just works. And whatever gap that is, we need to bridge here, we do. And so this may end up on desktops, for example. It's usually desktop services. It's a tough one because I didn't find any common name for it. I took it from KDE. KDE is calling it KDE Desktop Service. So I use the term desktop services for the same thing because you have the same concept on Windows. On Windows, we implement the desktop service as a COM server. So it's an out-of-process COM server, what we're doing. And on macOS, for example, it's just a process you start behind with launchd, right? So that's different concepts behind that, but it's on KDE, for sure, it's a KDE desktop service, clear? So you see that it's depending on your platform where you work on what that thing is. Because we want things like, we have a concept for trust, which is different from PGP. In PGP, I think you have you are attaching user IDs. One is the main user ID and the primary, and you attach them to your key, and then the trust goes to that key user ID combination, right? In PEP, we do that differently because I need a concept I can do on all crypto technologies and then find a mapping and adapt, which is not so easy and which is not 100% possible, so it's a little different. In PEP, we are trying to find out what our user is thinking, who the people he is talking with are. So we have a representation of a person, and the trust is between a key and that person. That's a little different because that allows us, which you never can do with PGP and probably don't want because you have another model, but that allows us to, if you have trust between a person and a key, we can use the same key on a different channel. And because PEP has different communication channels, we need such a feature, right? Or we would need user IDs which are not email, and we would need, would need to collect all user IDs of all channels with a key. Then we could adapt that to the PGP concept, right? So it's a little different what we do as PEP, because we are not only doing PGP. Yes. Was that clear enough, or shall I give some detail there? How it actually works. So in PEP, with a user, we mean a natural person. And an identity in PEP is the combination of a user with an address in the network. So the combination user network address we call an identity. And we're doing that too because we fully support fake addresses. Guess why? We are a privacy project. Of course we do. So, for example, PEP creates a new key if you have another mailbox by default. You may not want that. That's true. I have keys which I use on 2 mailboxes, not only an aliases. You may not want that. What PEP is doing is we try to set a default which probably will match the privacy needs of the masses. And that's not an easy one because it's only a default and it's only privacy as default. And this may fail in different cases.
Are you creating a primary key for each user ID? Because user ID is
no, that's not what we're doing. Yes, but that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is, we try to integrate into messaging clients. And if the messaging clients, for example, do email, in email you have the concept that a mailbox is something else than an alias, right? An alias is a second name, a second address you're using for the same mailbox. And because we have the impression that many people create a new mailbox if they want to show another identity in the network, that's what common people often do. I just created a fake account on GMX, something like that. Because we are watching that, we try to set the default that it will match what they are doing. And that means if you have an alias for your email address, we create one key with 2 in OpenPGP called user ID, right? UID. While when you create another mailbox, we create another primary key. That's how we set the default. Because see us as one layer higher, right? We see you guys, your PGP guys, as delivering a technology we can base on. And we try, how can we adapt that? I think we all feel that gap, right? Well, I'm using GPG on the command line commonly. I don't have any gap with that user interface because I love command lines anyways. I really dislike to click around for nothing. It's just a waste of time. You're way quicker on Satchel, right? Always. But I know that the users I want to address, right? They're not like this. I need to find something which serves, and if I do it wrong, then I fall to the side of providing privacy. And they may influence it. So I would say if you're a high-level user, Either you can influence it because we provide interface for that, or you just use GNU-PG. If you know what to do, why do you need PEP? It's not needed. Then it's an option for being lazy, right? That's how I see it. It's just that we think that all crypto tools, that's not only GNU-PG, it's all crypto tools we have out of that experience of many years of crypto parties, are very technical because they have to be or they can never be secure, right? But on the other side, it's very difficult for common people to use them for exactly the same reason. And how to bridge that gap, and there is where we see PEP. Okay, so on mobile platform, you do it as components. Either you call it package or library or whatever they call it on their platform. On desktop, we create desktop adapters, which is mainly a process. Why a process? Think about on desktops, you have at the same time multiple applications which are using the same things. And it's just the same reason, I think, why GNU-PG decided for having an agent as a desktop service, right? It's just the same idea, I think. The JSON adapter goes extra because we add the JSON adapter to all desktop adapters as second interface. Because then, always, if PEP is already installed on the desktop and you start Enigmail, it just connects to the desktop adapter, while we will have kind of mini service for JSON, which Mozilla can deploy with Thunderbird. So we need to have a split here because Thunderbird does not want to install desktop services, right? So basically we need a solution which is that this thing starts up, has a look if on that desktop there's already a desktop service with PEP running and then just connects. And if it's not there, then it uses a minimal implementation as a library itself, right? That's basically the idea. So the JSON adapter goes a little extra. It's the same with the browser plugins, which we will provide. Browser plugins will use the JSON interface, of course. It's the same. And for the mobiles, it's, well, yes, it ends up using libraries. Okay, if you want to see source codes, just tell me. I have plenty of. That's not a problem. For the multiple language problem, we have an extra. Usually it's not a big thing anymore. I think it's very old style already to say not wrong. It's still true. Use Unicode, never use anything else again. In new projects, for sure not. If you have still projects which are not using Unicode, just switch. We have 2016, I'm sure. I just had a look into a calendar app. So, yes, Arabic people, for example, Jewish people, for example, Hebraic people write from right to left. Some people, like some Chinese, love to write from top to down. And we don't care anymore, and we support all of that because we're all people, right? So, and they use, of course, not only the character set of the empire, but their own. So that's a clear statement. For us, this gives a huge issue because we want to support the Unicode implementation of the application programmer's toolchain. So if they're using some ICU-based thing, they're encoding in UTF-32, while if they're using Windows, then they think they are encoding in UCS2, and it's only the bad part of the API where they still do that, and for all other parts, it's UTF-16, right? And there is things like, well, on each platform it's different, and the string implementations are different, and in Python you think like characters, and you don't mean Unicode characters, while with character, there's a huge difference between character and code point and encoding. That's all different, and there's normalization, all that bullshit. So we have a full concept of supporting Unicode correct. And that concept includes we are writing the PEP engine in pissy old C, which means no Unicode. So we decided that what is the same code point character, I have to be careful here because there's, do you know the character group in Unicode which is called maybe? Really, search for it, not kidding. So it's maybe characters, right? String concatenation of Unicode strings which are NFC normalized is not closed for NFC. Only string separation. If you don't understand what this crazy guy with the black hat is saying, congratulations, try not to, or you get involved, then really try, and that will be a tough one. So we try to do that right, and this is our choice, what we do in the API of the PEP engine. The adapters have to guarantee to deliver UTF-8 NFC normalized only, and that's how they are implemented, and the fucking PEP engine guarantees for nothing but that it will be still Unicode. So on the outside, you don't have a guarantee, and there's good reasons for that. I can explain them. It's a lecture, so. Yes. The problem is we're trying to move the Unicode problem as much as we can into the adapters because they have way better libraries, okay? So the adapters are also very important for implementing features which are really aching and hurting in plain old C. And the second reasons we have them is we try to make safe APIs and not C APIs. So the API for the application programmer, it should be as tough as possible to provide a buffer overflow, right? For example. Okay, so the next thing is why we switch to trust words. I already explained some of the reasons. One reason clearly is here. We want to support mother's tongue of the users. And now I'm talking about the users on the top level, the second big users group, the bigger one we have, which is the end users. And we were discussing how to do that it actually works. Cases like a French guy is talking to a French-speaking Canadian girl. What would they agree on? Do they want to switch between languages? No. They will see, even if it's not actually true, they will see that as dialects, what they differ in, and that's why we decided for ISO 6391 in the management of IATN when it comes to the engine, okay? So we don't differ between French and Canadian French at this point. The application may differ in that point, and that may be a good idea, but when it comes to trust words, we don't intentionally. Okay. So what is it behind the curtain? Well, again, we try not to invent crypto. We even try not to implement crypto. We failed for iOS because we cannot use GNU-PG on iOS, which we would love to, but I gave up. There is no hope, I think. So for iOS, we have an exception. If you will download the PEP for iOS stuff, then it will use NetPGP and not GNU-PG. On all other platforms, we are deploying GNU-PG. We are using GNU-PG via GPGNE as an engine. We are using it mainly for all PGP encryption, of course, and we are using it also as our key store because GNU-PG has great, we already learned that in another lecture here, GNU-PG has great possibilities to store keys. So that's very practical. We, for sure, will continue to provide SMIME support. So if you write an SMIME message to a PEP user, you get probably a SMIME encoded message back. The reason is compatibility. We want to support OTR for Jabber, at least. That's now, you see the sequence shining through. It's the big groups of users, right? And there's ongoing discussions about axolotl, which I really would love to see getting a crypto analysis, so we see if it's as good as OTR or better. I have plenty of people I really trust in which are telling me that. And I would like to see a proof of that, and that is why PEP wants to see such a proof, and we will try to help with that. And because on GNU.net you have the two options. You could do OTR or you could do axolotl. Is that still true, Christian?
You don't really have the option because OTRs, what we do off the record, is at the link level, but you want more than what you can necessarily do at the link
Sure.
level. You want to have multi-hop support, and then you have the axolotl.
Okay. Okay, so we need to do that anyways. Okay, so again, what we will found is a message transport based on GNU.net, because then we have just the properties we want to see as privacy activists, right? Like having full anonymized messaging, peer-to-peer. To answer a question from yesterday, because it's actually possible to use Tor in a safe way, and I probably did a bad job to explain. PEP has the concept, first, two concepts why we don't use that. The first concept is all what we do is peer-to-peer only. All what we design for ourselves is 100% peer-to-peer. So some Tor server infrastructure will not be provided by us just because this is infrastructure, right? Because out of experience, well, I'm a member in a club, you know, we are known for driving a couple of Tor servers ourselves. And I was like the secretary of the CCC for more than 15 years. So I was in that group who gets all those emails from the lawyers, right? And I can tell you it's the pain in the ass. It's just driving endpoints. It's just, well, we do it anyways, but we will continue to do that in different CCC organizations. But actually it is, how should I say? Well, yes, you drive infrastructure and that makes you weak, right? So we try to find a solution which is peer-to-peer only, that there is no infrastructure involved. And the second thing is people using Tor have no fucking clue how to do that. That's the same problem we face. It's not the fault of Tor, but that's their job. They did it way better when they decided to provide an own browser, which was a very good choice for them, I think. They are really helpful with doing that because the browser of the user was always the main issue, how you could uncover Tor users. But that's not all. So our problem with Tor is that users fuck it up. It's not Tor fucks it up, right? It's users fuck it up. And that is for us something which I have no idea how I could help the friends in Tor to fix it. I don't know. I hope they have better ideas than me on Tor. Probably that's always true. So there is still hope. But, well, yes. And that is something, infrastructure, even infrastructure, known people use it wrong by default, is a tough decision for PEP. I think that's the more clear answer, if you would like that one more, I hope, why we don't do it. By the way, PEP wants to be compatible, and that will remain. For example, when the OpenPGP community decides, and I think GNU-PG is a key player there, to roll out that in masses, PEP will support that, just because it's there. So it's not that we reject that, okay? That's the next thing I should mention. Because whatever people decide as a standard, PEP will support that because we want to make it accessible for the masses, right? We have no interest in rejecting technology people actually use. And believe me, if GNU-PG deploys Tor one day, for me it would be very much easier to support that than Facebook messages. When it comes to my heart, okay? That's not the issue, please.
We've supported Tor for the last 6 months or so, so it's rolled out, it's in the stable release.
Who is using it? That's my question. It's about users.
I'm not sure what you mean. If you have Tor installed and you add one option to your germanager.conf file, then you're using it.
How many people are adding that option?
The people who are paranoid,
or the people who are clever.
And it's in the default GPG hump file. So all new users are using it if they have Tor installed.
That's now a very good thing to know. That would be my question, if you could make it the default, because then we immediately start to support that.
Yeah, but we can't change it for existing configurations. So
I see, yes. Yes. Okay, let's see how that develops, but we will support whatever you make for the masses. Whatever it is, just because you do it. Okay, so that is our next issue. PEP is a concept about sending and receiving text messages, so it's that abstract. Why did those guys start with email? Because email is not what most of the people use for text messages anymore. Some say email is dead. That is totally wrong, because no one can buy things in the internet without having an email address. I think that's basically what keeps it alive. And the second thing is, email is used by all enterprises and SMBs, and they will not switch. So email now has a different placement in our view. It's used by the companies, the commercials, and it's used in the interface to those companies, which are usually today web interfaces for the users. So that is where we see email. We started with email for two reasons. One is it's one of the most complex text message protocols, and we want to see if our abstraction holds for the complex one like Jabber and email. Second is we need it on the commercial side, because on the commercial side you cannot do anything without email. They are still all depending on that. It's even worse, I can just repeat that. They all switch to Microsoft Outlook. Nearly 100% what we see in the businesses. So even if they use, which looks like growing this time, but I'm not sure yet, even if they use, what is it called, Google Documents or something like that, Google Business, or I forgot those names, I'm sorry. Even if you have that, then you use Outlook to access that, and that's why Google provides an Outlook plugin. Not kidding. So that's the world you have to face on the enterprise side, and because that gives the financing for our project, we implemented Outlook and Android first. We need some free software, we are not credible, but the funny thing, by the way, is the Outlook plugin of PEP and the full Outlook solution of PEP, of course, is published under GNU GPL version 3. So that's not that we leave free software, but we access free software. And I was talking about licenses a little. Of course, they can get it as like Red Hat software with a EULA and support contract and stuff. So they can decide how they want to use that.
Okay.
Yes?
Are you using GPL version 3 or later, or just GPL version 3 only?
We are using GPL version 3 and watching what GNU will do.
Well, GNU always recommends put all later.
You know, the good message about PEP is we own our code, so we can change that later. So for us, that's not really a difference, right?
Well, others cannot then. So if I incorporate your code into GNUnet, that's the problem, because GNUnet is v3 or later.
Okay, if that is an issue, we can change that. I wouldn't care about it. We just didn't think about that. Please.
So any contributors have to assign their rights to your foundation or company?
Yes, that's one of the issues we have. That's why we did not yet start any contribution concept at all. Because otherwise, by the way, to the foundation, not to the company, but otherwise we cannot play that game. It cannot work because we cannot do commercial licenses and a multi-license concept, because we cannot change the license with the acceptance of the contributor. And we are not, today we are just having solutions by when we make a deal with the free software concept, we are asking for a mirrored ownership. So a contract where actually we're driving a mirror in a rightly thing, in a legal meaning, but we don't fork. It's just for solving the ownership problems, because we need to decide, you know, if, for example, where we are closest, if Mozilla may decide to have encryption with PEP, like Enigma PEP in their standard distribution of Thunderbird, that will be 30 million users in one take, right? And when Mozilla, for example, they did not ask for it yet, there was already a license discussion, we found other solutions, but it would be typically Mozilla to ask, well, we accept, comma, but then you have to switch to MPL, right? And then we need to. And we do. We make a Mozilla exception, and in this fictitious example, which is not too far away, because that's what we are working in, and then we do that. And at this point of time, GNU-PG will get a question. If you would accept that, if you don't, we would unfortunately have a second platform where we would be forced to supply NetPGP. So whatever you decide, you will not crash it, but of course we would love to deploy it, to continue deploying GNU-PG. And this would be not too hard, because if a PEP desktop adapter is already installed, then GNU-PG will be installed, right? So, and if Thunderbird then will be installed, then it accesses GNU-PG, and it only would use NetPGP in case that no other PEP is on the machine, right? So it's getting smaller, but why is GNU-PG so important for us? We don't have the resources, and probably never will have, to go into fixing side channel attacks and doing weird things like you guys do. So we feel NetPGP being inferior. We are only using it as replacement where we cannot depend on your software.
To avoid the licensing issue, you might also not use the GHM-GNU library, but use the binary instead, and then require that the user installs it.
I cannot do that. I cannot require the user to do anything. That's PEP. That's the issue. Privacy by default. No, really, take it serious. If we can remove a step, we do, always. And then it's gone. It will not be discussed anymore, because that's the only reason why PEP is there. That we see as our mission, right? You do nothing, it works. If we even would require the user to click a button to automatically install it, we would reject that, and we do.
But you don't use static linking, so you have the dependency of GNU-PG is still in your current proposal.
Sure.
Yeah, that can stay the same.
Yes, I'm not talking about techniques. I'm talking about users. There will be no button for the user or no option for the user to install anything. There is no options. There is default. That's my concept. That's the full PEP concept.
Then I don't understand your problem.
That may be true. I don't know. But actually, again, we try to find a legal solution for the user does nothing, it just does its job. If all solutions, including comma, but the user could, and then there is no problem, are wiped out, just by concept. And is that an answer, or?
Kind of.
Okay. That's a decision, okay?
There's a thing that I don't quite understand. I had a look at your wiki, and some of these things, it seems like you're building a retrofitted new crypto system for an existing messaging application.
Basically, yes.
But with others, like for example in the email case, you're attempting to provide a user interface to existing technologies and machinery for automatically driving the existing protocols with some sort of vague understanding of how an endpoint ought to operate. Is that right?
I'm thinking about what you're saying. I'm sorry.
So, I mean, for example, you gave the example of doing S-MIME with email. So
Yes.
if I send a back using SMIME. So
Sure.
you're not inventing a new email encryption program.
Sure, not for that
But
case,
in
no.
some of these messaging systems you are.
Yes.
And
And we try to move people to the better ones.
right. So I suppose what I was looking for in your documentation,
Yes.
in the wiki, was some, more formal descriptions of what your protocol strategies were, or is that just intended in code, or do you have
Okay, now I understand the question.
specification or something that explains what your protocol is in when you have a protocol and what your implementation choices
I see.
are when you use an existing protocol?
At first, I'm very sorry that our documentation still is way too bad. And we are constantly working on that, and that's a huge amount of work. So I feel bad at that point, and I know that we documented too less still. It's even worse, we just switched to another documentation system. So all what you see today in the tracks will be replaced by the new one. Because we had the chance to agree with our friends at PEP Security that we use the same technology platform. And by doing so, we hope that there will be synergies in documentation and we get way more. So I'm pretty sure, unfortunately, the answer to your question is, sorry, we didn't do a good job yet, but we're working on it. So
there's a background to this, which is the need for essentially re-implementable standards. Now, if you're implementing existing email
yes,
protocols with maybe a profile or a particular behavioral model, then even a fairly short description of how the user interface drives the existing protocol is probably sufficient. But in the cases where you are basically adding a new encryption system to a messaging setup that doesn't have encryption already, then
yes,
I think
you're searching.
it's essential. We already have multiple implementations of email encryption that interoperate.
Sure.
If we have a new encryption system for an existing messaging application, then it should be re-implementable, even if we don't intend to actually re-implement it.
Sure, and it will, but please give us some time.
Okay, jolly good.
We will publish everything. We also intending to, if we get it written down in a way that we can dare to do that, we want to ask the IETF to make it standards.
Good luck.
Yes.
Thank you for the good thoughts.
RC means request for comment, and that does not talk about the answers you get, right? It's just a request. But I'm fully aware of that, but, we are still a small group of people. We are now 26, and this is a huge thing, right? So we're constantly working on it, and please ask us maybe a half of a year or a year later if we did better then.
Okay, great, good answer, thank you.
Yes, I'm trying to understand how it works from the user perspective. Let's take the example of Facebook, because there's a lot of users who use that for participating.
Yes?
Do they have to, I guess they have to install a plugin or something?
Yes.
Okay, but from both ends? Or let's say I'm a Facebook user and I
Yes.
want to use PEP because I'm aware of it. But
Yes.
the guy I'm talking to doesn't know about it if I just install PEP.
Yes, the trick.
Will he get it to work or
Yes, we see it slightly different because we have the hope that if you install a plugin for encrypting your email in your web mailer and then switch to Facebook and the other guy did the same, then Facebook messages will just get encrypted without even taking care of on your side. Right? Make it the default. And you can switch it off, by the way. You will see something, you see the lights, and you can click on the green or yellow light and can say, no, this message goes out unencrypted. We just switch the default, right? So if you install for totally other reasons some browser plugin, then Facebook starts to encrypt. That's basically the idea.
So it's just a plugin to install?
Yes. And there's no config. There is config, you could do it, but if you don't do it, it just works. With the defaults PEP is providing. It's You may dislike them, of course, like with all defaults, with all software, but that's what we're doing.
I think part of the question was if I'm not a pet user at all, but I'm a Facebook user or a counterfactual, then and I install this Facebook plugin or whatever it is,
Yes?
then is this going to cause me pain in communicating with the other people that I know who don't
No.
have this plugin? And obviously the answer to that, what you say, must be no.
It is no, because we detect if we signal, right? And we detect if the other guy has PEP or not. And if not, then your message goes out unencrypted still. We don't interfere. That's a rule of law inside PEP. When the user press send, the message goes out. Full stop with the discussion. So all what we signal is before you press send. No warning, no should we encrypt that or anything. If user presses send, a message goes out, and it's only encrypted as good as the other side is guaranteed to being able to decrypt.
So you won't ask the other user if he wants to install PEP as well to get it encrypted?
There's a discussion about that. Actually, we are going to provide what we call the PEP reader on the commercial side for companies, because some business guys in PEP security have the idea to make it viral by that. But that is not violating that law, because we do it the following. If you, as the sender, do nothing, you press send, the message goes out unencrypted. But now you have a button which is invite. And then you can invite the other guy to actually use any encryption software. And there will be links, of course, to PEP. And we will link depending on the platform. So if you're using it, for example, on a GNU Linux system, you will get a link to Kmail and Enigmail. And with the invitation, if you're using it on, let's say, a Windows system using Outlook, then you get an commercial ad for PEP for Outlook, and the download link for what they call the reader, which is actually PEP. So you can decide what you want. And this is invitation, but that does not violate the law. That is why I agreed to that concept, because the sender has to actively invite a person. It's never the other way around. When you press just send, it goes out, and if the other person has nothing, then it goes out unencrypted. We don't want to mess up with the communication of the users. That's a law. I never will lose.
Do you have some code for the signaling? Does it work like OTR, opportunistic encryption, or how do you do that?
It's a little more complex because we have more transports. For example, we just expect the application programmer to give us the messages to see which come in. And guess what is happening if a message is PGP signed? What do you think? Then I write down in my database, right?
Yeah, of course, but you have to bootstrap in the beginning.
Yes, sure.
You have to detect if both users installed PEP.
Yes.
They don't know about that.
Yes, sure. So if both users have PEP, then it depends if they communicate synchronously or asynchronously. If you have what we call an offline or asynchronous communication only, like email, then for sure the first message will be unencrypted to an unknown person.
Yeah, and how does the receiver then detect that you're using PEP?
Well, the message is signed, and you have in the header you have a signal. In this case.
Okay. So you're automatically signing the message then?
Yes. Basically, yes. We have the hope if people are using PEP and we are able to deploy GNU-net, and this is online, we have the hope that we can just do some fully automated protocol online between the two of them, that they can just do a handshake in technology, right? And so you even don't see what's happening, and the first message goes out fully encrypted already.
Yeah, now I'm wondering if you're not, as you say, interfering with the communication itself, not saying that one user is using PEP and the other one is not, and you would like
true. Of course, we didn't even start with our communication concept. That's just coming now. We are working on it. We are in the phase that we have a very first release on Outlook and a first beta on with our K9 fork, and that's where we're standing today, right? So we are at the very beginning, not telling too much to the public yet, and of course we have idea how to spread it. So one that reader, even for commercial users, then you have some ridiculous thing like a reader, right? You don't need that on the free software side. You download the full thing, of course, that's obvious. But these are actually measures we are discussing internally and doing because that is what will come now. And we have the hope, for example, that lawyers would love that product. And when lawyers love it, usually their customers start to like it. Because usually the customers of lawyers and lawyers have interest to get some privacy. And we just segmented the market and discussed which group of people could be interested most, and this is where we begin. And this is where we try to give it some drive, right? While for us, it's not enemy. I dislike that thinking in friend and enemy. This that's not my part. But let's say one of the toughest competitions I see is WhatsApp. And of course, we have ideas how to address that problem, and they are totally different from privacy, by the way. So to answer that question in a good way, we need to talk about different segments, market segments, because we try to segment the market by people with very different interests, right? For example, the huge enterprises all understood that they are fucked and want to have privacy now, for good reasons. And for them, it's very tough to introduce PGP solutions, which they all tried. Everyone, we are talking to a lot of them. My partner, Leon Schumacher, with whom I founded that thing, in his former job, he was group CIO of ArcelorMittal, that's the biggest steel company on planet. And after that, he was group CIO of Novartis, so he knows the customer side. And then he switched, like many top managers do, be driving some consulting company. In his case, it's IT and security. That's where we met. And now he's also driving, CIO roundtables. So Pep is sitting at the CIO roundtable where all the CIO of the huge enterprises in Europe meet. That's why I was giving a lecture there too already. And that's what we're doing. And the feedback I can tell you what we get from those guys is that they really want it. They really want to have privacy, and they all tried PGP implementations and SMIME implementations. It was all a big mess, and they didn't succeed because people are fucking stupid, don't know how the key is expired. What do I do now? It's really like this. That is, face it or not, this is the fact. This is how they see it. I can introduce it to some people who are just doing that job still. So what we are doing, we now did the pilot in a huge enterprise. It's a car manufacturer. I shouldn't talk about the city where it's in, so because of the NDA. And we get brilliant results. I really love it because we have the same topic, right? Because if they tell us, you have to change that, or it will be too complicated for us, we are taking notes and next version has it, right? Because that's the only thing which is about make it the default now. And we have the hope that if we get that drive in what we call the consumers, it's such cynical, I'm sorry. For me, the consumers are the most difficult one. Because the consumers, I learned that because when we do, I'm constantly doing that still. I'm a left-wing mad cow, so what we do is demonstrations and stuff, And if you go to a demonstration about privacy, and what I'm always doing is I'm standing at the outside and with flyers, right, and try to access people. just walking by, because that's why I go to a demonstration. I want to talk about my topic, right? I want to publish it, and I want to talk to people. And I can answer that Edward Snowden's fear is not coming true, and he can be lucky, and he's a great guy anyways, but because he changed it. What Snowden changed is that before, when I was at Freiheit statt Angst, for example, our demonstration, which I was part of the team for many, many years, when I was talking before to people just walking by, it was, oh, well, I have nothing to hide. That was the answer. And after Snowden, the answer is totally different. It is, in quotes, it is, well, yes, but what can I do as a single person? And that changes everything, because that means I continue to use Facebook, I continue to use WhatsApp, but now I feel uncomfortable with it. I continue because I value being communicative with my friends higher than privacy. I dislike that as a privacy activist, but I have to face it as a fact, right? That's how people think. But privacy is important, and I see that they fuck me, and what can I do, right? So I don't want to lose that, but on the other hand, I feel uncomfortable, and that made a lot of discussion about the privacy settings of Facebook, which is, of course, totally weird, right? Because you can make a cross wherever you want, you fucked. It just doesn't matter what you said there. It's ridiculous. But it's a contradiction in terms, privacy settings of Facebook, right? It's an oxymoron. Okay. But that's how it is. So Snowden changed that. That worked, in my experience. And so I have the feeling, why don't we give people an excuse to move away from WhatsApp, right? Why don't we give them features which are totally unrelated to security? Well, behind the curtain, probably not, but that's another. Because I'm sorry, I'm a privacy activist, always thinking like that, right? And the two features we will try, if people like them, is first synchronization, and second, unified inbox. So the idea of unified inbox is, if you have a smartphone, I think many people on the African continent have now, for example. Many people in India have, believe me. If you have a smartphone, message goes in, then one of 5 apps is shaking, right? You add a 6th app, which is PEP, and it's shaking too, but it shakes always. It doesn't matter which one is shaking, PEP shakes always. So it's the most, well, laziest choice, just to use PEP, because it always shakes there, so if you have that open, then you don't need the other apps anymore, right? But for that, PEP needs to be a very good app. So I'm now into programming app, which I never wanted, but okay. So it's very different now, right? Different story. And that's unified inbox. And you press reply, and what does PEP engine do? Well, it's searching on GNU.net if that person can be reached by PEP too, right? No matter how that thing came in. And just sends out the message in the most costly way, because we do cost optimization, you remember, it's most cost router. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is synchronization. If you install PEP on a second device, the second device and the first device say, the first device says, well, there seems to be a second device. Shall we add that to our device group? And the second device says, well, there seems to be a device group already. Shall I add myself to that? And you see trust words. And if the trust words are the same, you can say yes on both sides. And then those devices start to synchronize. They synchronize keys. They synchronize trust. But they also start to synchronize addresses and dates without needing any cloud. Wow, cross-platform. They synchronize from your Outlook to your K9, okay, and to your Enigma. So we have the hope at providing such features, well, behind the curtain, that may be a little privacy related too, that I remove the unencrypted cloud, right? And probably some people will dislike PEP because we are doing that, but fuck them. So that's basically the concept which we have here. So because it will be peer-to-peer, encrypted over GNU-net anonymized, right? So who is out of the game? So by providing these features, we hope that people get too convinced to switch to PEP, which would mean they add lots of privacy to other aspects too, right? That's basically the idea. So if that is planned for PEP 2.0, and that's where we're actually working on, by the way, so the idea is, if we get them to the point to like those features no one other, we hope, wants to provide, you know, I'm pretty sure who wants to provide fully encrypted and anonymized peer-to-peer synchronization? I have the feeling Google probably not, because of business model, right? So, and that's the concept. So what we want to offer is, and you see that really has to work like a charm or no one will use it. We will crash with it, right? So that's also risky. So we will develop in it until we have it brilliantly, and before that we will not publish it, right? But that's what I'm personally working on. I'm just working on the synchronization of keys now, which is the first one, and then quickly will be added the synchronization of trust, and then there will be added the other forms of data which we want to synchronize.
What about audio and video communication?
What do you mean? I'm sorry?
What about, I don't know, Skype, Hangout, things like that? Will be awesome.
Well, let's say we start with messages. And starting with messages has a huge advantage you don't have with Skype. Well, latency is not so important, right? Which is good to anonymization. So I think the latency problem is another which we need to discuss in such groups here for, for real-time services like voice and video conferences. But let's see. We will not start with that. But PEP does not necessarily end here. I don't know what we will work on with that project. You see it's already huge enough, right? So we decided we take care of that first.
That's not impossible.
No, sure not. We have the hope that we find a way to do GNU-net in a very clever way on mobiles without fucking it up for, taking too much CPU, taking too much battery, taking too much traffic, and so forth. It's not so easy. But if we manage to do that, then I think this would be the next logical step to take care about voice and video, right? Let's see. I don't know where this will lead us to, because I don't see a solution yet which I would like for that. So I don't know. We start with messages. Let's see. Okay, it's also see PEP as a platform. It's not only PEP, right? You could use PEP for messages and something else for videos, for example. It's not needed. PEP does not need to dominate the world, okay? Not in that sense. I mean it when I say it's a pinky in the brain project. Hopefully not, because of the ending. Let's see. Okay, but you see now why we need a transport system, because we need to decide where a message goes out, right? We cannot decide where it comes in. But we need to decide that it goes out through the most private channel. So that's why we do that. Okay, already said that. Basically, that's that slide, I think. Okay, so if you have any further questions, Christian will tell you not now, because now we have to go or something. Is it that, Christian, or do we have time?
No, we have some questions, but if you are hungry, we can also go.
That's unfair now. That's unfair. Okay, if you still have any questions, I'm here at this conference too, and we can also talk while eating, I think. Well, not at exact the same time, but with time slices. So, thank you very much.